The Glargh Collective. Imagine an empire forged in the crushing depths of a methane ocean, where sunlight is a forgotten myth, and the only law is conquest. Picture legions of bioluminescent warriors, clad in pressure-forged armor, their every thought dedicated to the expansion of their abyssal domain. They communicated in clicks and whistles that could shatter your eardrums, their battle cries echoing through the inky blackness of space. These weren't your friendly neighborhood space squids. The Glargh were serious, very serious. Their warships resembled colossal armored nautiluses, bristling with weaponry capable of pulverizing planets into cosmic dust. Their culture was built on a foundation of ruthless efficiency and unwavering obedience to the Grand Mollusk, their supreme leader. And nestled, rather incongruously within the heart of their flagship, the Iron Barnacle, was a single human. Ambassador Emily Carter. Emily wasn't exactly what you'd expect from an ambassador representing Earth to a hyper-militaristic aquatic species. For one thing, she had an almost pathological aversion to taking anything seriously. Picture a woman who could diffuse an intergalactic crisis with a well-timed sarcastic remark, or perhaps end up causing it. She had been assigned to the Glargh Collective as a sign of good faith, a gesture of diplomacy from a planet that mostly just wanted to be left alone to binge-watch old sitcoms and argue about the Oxford comma. Earth's strategy was simple: send someone utterly baffling and hope the aliens would be too confused to attack. The Iron Barnacle itself was a sight to behold, a sprawling metallic monstrosity filled with bubbling tanks, twisting corridors, and the pervasive smell of brine and ozone. The Glargh moved with a synchronized precision that bordered on the absurd, their every action dictated by a complex web of protocols and hierarchies. Emily, on the other hand, navigated the ship with the grace of a caffeinated sloth, usually clad in a pair of comfy sweatpants and a t-shirt emblazoned with the words, "I-3 Space Otters." The Glargh were perplexed. Their rigid customs were a constant source of amusement for Emily. The daily mandatory synchronized swimming exercises, the elaborate kelp-based meals served with ritualistic precision, the incessant clicking and whistling that formed their language, it was all just so wonderfully weird. She tried her best to be respectful, of course, but sometimes the urge to poke fun at their deeply ingrained traditions was just too overwhelming. Like the time she accidentally replaced the Grand Mollusk's ceremonial seaweed wig with a feather boa. That incident had resulted in a week of tense negotiations and a formal apology delivered via interpretive dance. But even then, Emily couldn't help but snicker. The Glargh were just so earnest, so utterly convinced of their own superiority, that it was almost endearing. Almost. The cultural gap between humanity and the Glargh Collective was less of a gap and more of a chasm filled with awkward silences, bewildered stares, and the occasional accidental insult. And Emily Carter, armed with her wit, her sarcasm, and her complete lack of understanding of alien etiquette, was standing right at the edge, ready to dive in headfirst. The Glargh took their weaponry very seriously. It wasn't just about blowing up planets. It was about doing so with the utmost respect for tradition, protocol, and the crushing weight of the ocean. Every year, they held a grand weapon inspection, a sacred ritual to ensure that their instruments of destruction were functioning at peak efficiency and adhering to the strict aesthetic guidelines dictated by ancient Glargish texts. The date was marked on Emily's calendar, not with any sense of reverence, but rather with the mental note: giant fish parade of doom, bring snacks. She'd been invited to observe, which in Glargh terms meant she was politely ordered to attend and stand very still while important fish things happened around her. The invitation had been delivered by a particularly grumpy Glargh commander named Glargh, whose bioluminescent markings seemed to permanently display a look of profound disapproval. Ambassador Carter, Glargh had clicked, his voice echoing through the metal corridors. Your presence at the annual weaponry verification ceremony is required. It will provide invaluable insight into the rigorous standards upheld by the Glargh Collective. Emily had suppressed a grin and replied, "Wouldn't miss it for the world, Glargh. Always wanted to see how you guys polish your planet-destroying thingamajigs. Glargh's markings pulsed slightly, a clear indication of Glarghish irritation. The day of the inspection dawned with the usual Glarghish fanfare, synchronized swimming formations in the main hydro bay, a mournful kelp horn solo, and the booming pronouncements of the Grand Weapons Master, a particularly ancient and barnacle-encrusted Glargh who seemed to communicate primarily through guttural clicks and the occasional jet of ink. Emily, dressed in her I-3 Space Otters t-shirt and a pair of slightly too small Glarghish-issued waders, stood awkwardly on a raised platform, trying to look interested as the Glargh paraded their weaponry before her. It was quite a sight. There were plasma cannons that hummed with contained fury, missile launchers shaped like giant anglerfish, and energy weapons that crackled with enough power to vaporize a small moon. Each weapon was presented with the solemnity of a religious artifact, its function explained in excruciating detail by a junior weapons officer, who seemed terrified of making even the slightest mistake. Emily tried to follow along, but the Glarghish obsession with technical specifications and historical precedents quickly overwhelmed her. "So," she interrupted at one point, "this big glowy thing, it just blows stuff up, right?" The junior officer sputtered, his bioluminescent markings flickering wildly. "Ambassador Carter, this is the Abyssal Annihilator. It does not merely blow stuff up. It initiates a controlled singularity cascade, resulting in the utter dissolution of matter at a subatomic level." Emily nodded slowly. Right. Controlled singularity cascade. Got it. Blows stuff up real good." The officer fainted. As the inspection continued, Emily couldn't help but notice one weapon in particular that seemed to garner a disproportionate amount of respect and fear from the Glargh. It was a large, ominous-looking device covered in barnacles and emitting a low, pulsating hum. This, she was informed, was the Siphon of Souls. The Grand Weapons Master himself approached the Siphon, his ancient eyes gleaming with reverence. "This weapon," he clicked, his voice echoing through the hydro bay, "is the ultimate expression of Glarghish power. It does not merely destroy the body, but consumes the very essence of its victims. Their souls are trapped within its coils, forever." Tormented by the might of the Glargh Collective, Emily raised an eyebrow. "So it's like a soul vacuum cleaner?" The Grand Weapons Master stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, he let out a deafening roar of indignation. It was going to be a long day. Boredom, it turned out, was Emily's greatest weapon. Days on the iron barnacle stretched into weeks, each one filled with endless Glarghish pronouncements and the soul-crushing monotony of interspecies diplomacy. She needed a project, something to occupy her restless mind and twitchy fingers. The Glargh, in their infinite wisdom, had provided her with the perfect outlet, their ridiculously over-engineered weaponry. Emily, bless her human heart, saw not instruments of destruction, but rather opportunities for improvement. And she had a roll of duct tape with her name on it. It started small. A slightly loose bolt on a plasma cannon, easily remedied with a strip of the aforementioned adhesive. A targeting system that seemed to lag a bit. A strategically placed wad of chewing gum to improve the alignment. Hey, if it was good enough for Apollo 13, the Glargh, of course, were horrified. Glargh, in particular, seemed to develop a nervous twitch in his left tentacle whenever Emily approached a weapon rack. He tried to explain, in increasingly frantic clicks and gurgles, that Glarghish weaponry was not to be trifled with, that each component was meticulously crafted according to ancient and sacred designs. Emily, however, remained unfazed. "Relax, Glargh," she'd say with a disarming grin. "I'm just streamlining things. A little human ingenuity never hurt anyone." Of course, she saved her masterpiece for last, the Siphon of Souls. The very idea of it fascinated her. The Glargh clearly thought it was some kind of super terrifying, soul-sucking doomsday device, but Emily suspected the reality was far less impressive. After a surreptitious late-night visit to the Siphon's chamber, armed with a multi-tool and a healthy dose of skepticism, she quickly confirmed her suspicions. The Siphon of Souls, beneath all the barnacles and ominous hums, was essentially a glorified water pump with some fancy lights attached. "Oh, this is just sad," she muttered to herself, peering into the siphon's inner workings. All this build-up for a glorified sump pump. That's when inspiration struck. If the Glargh wanted a soul-sucking superweapon, Emily was going to give them one, or at least the most efficient barnacle-removing device the galaxy had ever seen. Her modifications were extensive. She replaced the antiquated pump with a high-powered industrial-strength model she borrowed from the Iron Barnacle's sanitation system. She rewired the lights to create a more dramatic, pulsating effect. She even added a custom sound system that played a loop of whale song at ear-splitting volume. But the pièce de résistance was the nozzle. Emily replaced the Siphon's original, vaguely menacing aperture with a wide-bore spray nozzle designed for agricultural fertilizer. Her logic was simple. If you're going to suck souls, you might as well do it efficiently. The Glargh commanders, meanwhile, were growing increasingly uneasy. They watched with a mixture of fear and fascination as Emily tinkered with their most sacred weapon. Glargh tried to intervene several times, but Emily always managed to deflect his concerns with a combination of charm, misdirection, and the occasional strategically placed wrench. "Trust me, Glargh," she'd say, patting him on the tentacle. "This is going to be great. You guys are gonna love it." The Glargh commanders most definitely did not love it. They had a very bad feeling about what Ambassador Carter was planning. And they were absolutely right to be afraid. The day of the weapon inspection dawned bright and, well, as bright as things could get inside the Iron Barnacle. The Glargh, in their full ceremonial armor, which mostly consisted of slightly shinier barnacles, assembled in the main hangar. Glargh, looking paler than usual, oversaw the proceedings with a nervous glint in his multifaceted eyes. Emily, dressed in her standard-issue Earth Ambassador uniform, which she'd accessorized, with a Keep Earth Clean button, stood beside him beaming with pride. "Ready to see some real innovation, Glargh?" she asked cheerfully. Glargh responded with a low guttural groan that sounded suspiciously like a plea for help. The inspection began with the plasma cannons. The Glargh paraded their weaponry with solemn reverence, demonstrating their destructive capabilities with practiced precision. Blasts of searing energy ripped through the air, vaporizing targets with terrifying ease. Emily clapped politely after each demonstration. "Very impressive," she said. "But have you considered adding cup holders? You know, for those long space voyages." The Glargh commanders exchanged confused glances. Cup holders? On a plasma cannon? The idea was so absurd, so utterly alien to their militaristic sensibilities, that they didn't even know how to respond. Next came the sonic disruptors, the gravity nullifiers, and a particularly nasty-looking device that supposedly turned enemies inside out. Emily offered helpful suggestions for each one. More comfortable grips, brighter warning lights, and maybe a little aromatherapy to take the edge off. The Glargh's confusion grew with each passing moment. They had never encountered such blatant disrespect for the art of galactic warfare. Was this some kind of elaborate human joke? A subtle form of psychological warfare? They couldn't be sure, but they knew one thing. They didn't like it. Finally, the moment arrived for the pièce de résistance, the Siphon of Souls. The massive device was wheeled into the center of the hangar, its modified lights pulsating ominously, the custom-installed sound system emitting a low, mournful whale song. Emily stepped forward, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Behold," she announced, "the Siphon of Souls now with 300% more soul-sucking power." Glargh gulped audibly. He had a very, very bad feeling about this. He signaled to the Siphon's operator, a nervous-looking Glargh named Glargh, to begin the demonstration. Glargh, his tentacles trembling, pressed the activation button. The Siphon of Souls whirred to life, its lights flashing, its whale song reaching a deafening crescendo. A thick, frothy foam erupted from the fertilizer nozzle, engulfing the hangar in a massive cloud of bubbles. Instead of draining souls, the Siphon of Souls was creating a giant bubble bath. Panic erupted among the Glargh. They shrieked and flailed, their ceremonial armor covered in suds. The air filled with the sound of frantic clicking and gurgling. As the Glargh struggled to comprehend what was happening, Glargh stared in disbelief, his multifaceted eyes wide with horror. What is this?" he sputtered, his voice barely audible above the din. Emily, unfazed by the chaos, chuckled softly. "Surprise," she said. "I call it the bathing of souls. It's much more therapeutic, don't you think?" The Glargh, covered in bubbles and thoroughly humiliated, were not amused. The weapon inspection had descended into utter sudsy chaos. Their most feared weapon had been transformed into a giant, malfunctioning bubble machine. And Ambassador Emily Carter, the supposed representative of humanity, was standing in the middle of it all, grinning like a loon. The hangar was a swirling vortex of bubbles and panicked Glargh. Glargh, now resembling a disgruntled, heavily barnacled snowman, tried desperately to restore order. He barked commands, but his voice was lost in the general pandemonium. The other commanders fared no better, slipping and sliding on the soapy floor as they attempted to regain control of the situation. Through the chaos, Emily watched with detached amusement. It was at this moment, seeing their most sacred ritual dissolve into a bubbly farce, that she decided the time had come to reveal the truth. She cleared her throat, the sound surprisingly loud in the otherwise cacophonous hangar. All right, settle down, everyone," she announced, her voice laced with an almost motherly authority. The Glargh, momentarily stunned into silence, turned their bubble-covered faces towards her. Glargh, still dripping with foam, glared at her with barely suppressed rage. "Perhaps," she continued with a playful grin, "an explanation is in order." She gestured towards the monstrous device still churning out bubbles with gleeful abandon. "You call this the Siphon of Souls, a weapon of unimaginable terror, capable of stripping the very essence of your enemies. But let's be honest, shall we? It's just a glorified barnacle scraper." A collective gasp rippled through the ranks of the Glargh. Even Glargh seemed taken aback, his multifaceted eyes blinking in disbelief. A barnacle scraper?" he stammered, his voice barely a gurgle. Emily nodded, her expression softening slightly. "That's right. I did a little digging into the Iron Barnacle's maintenance logs when I first arrived. Turns out this thing was designed to blast algae and crustaceans off the hull. You just repurposed it with a little extra flair." She paused, letting the revelation sink in. "I merely optimized its primary function." She gestured to the fertilizer tank she'd modified. "The modifications I made? Those were for increased efficiency. The fertilizer nozzle provides even distribution, and the custom lights encourage the algae to detach from the hull faster. I even improved the solution. The whale song," she added, "was meant to calm the barnacles before removal." The Glargh stared at her, speechless. Their most feared weapon, the instrument of their galactic ambitions, was nothing more than a high-powered cleaning device. Humiliation washed over them like another wave of bubbles. The silence that followed Emily's revelation was thicker than the soap suds clinging to the bulkheads. The Glargh stood motionless, their multifaceted eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. Glargh's mandibles twitched, and a low, guttural moan escaped his throat. Their most sacred weapon, the instrument of their galactic aspirations, reduced to a cleaning tool. Emily, blissfully unaware of the depth of the cultural wound she had inflicted, simply shrugged. "So," she said, her voice echoing in the cavernous hangar, "anyone fancy a bath?" She beamed at them, a picture of innocent helpfulness. The Glargh stared at her, each one processing the information in their own way. Some began to tremble, others simply deflated like punctured bladders. Glargh closed his eyes as if trying to block out the horrifying truth. Their dreams of conquest, their meticulously crafted image of themselves as terrifying warriors, shattered into a million tiny, soapy fragments. The absurdity of it all, the sheer, unadulterated ridiculousness, finally overwhelmed them. One by one, the Glargh commanders began to weep, not with sadness but with a profound, existential despair. Their meticulously ordered world, their rigid hierarchy, their entire belief system, had been undermined by a human with a wrench and a roll of duct tape. In that moment, the Glargh Collective abandoned their plans for galactic domination. What was the point? How could they possibly hope to conquer the galaxy when they couldn't even maintain the illusion of competence in the face of humanity? They retreated to their chambers, defeated not by superior firepower or cunning strategy, but by sheer, unadulterated, baffling kindness. The iron barnacle, once a symbol of Glargh aggression, became a floating testament to human eccentricity. The dreaded Siphon of souls was quietly decommissioned, replaced with actual cleaning equipment. And the Glargh Collective, humbled and bewildered, began to reevaluate their place in the cosmos, all thanks to a single well-meaning human and her unwavering belief in the power of a good scrub. And so, a new era dawned for the Glargh Collective, one strangely scented with lavender and bubbles. The revelation of the Siphon of souls sparked an unexpected cultural revolution. Forget galactic conquest. The Glargh became obsessed with cleanliness. Their war budget was promptly redirected into researching and developing the most advanced, luxurious bathing technologies imaginable. Their scientists, previously dedicated to weapons development, now toiled away on formulas for the perfect bath bomb, the ideal water temperature, and the most soothing sonic vibrations for a truly transcendent bathing experience. They even started importing rare iridescent algae from across the galaxy to create shimmering, otherworldly bathwater. Ambassador Emily Carter, much to her own surprise, became a cultural icon. Statues were erected in her honor, depicting her, holding a wrench in one hand and a rubber ducky in the other. She was lauded as the great cleanser, the bringer of hygiene, the champion of, really clean spaceships. Interspecies relations took a bizarre turn. Diplomatic missions now involved the exchange of artisanal soaps and scented candles. Treaties were signed not with blood but with bath salts. The galaxy, previously bracing for Glargh invasion, was instead inundated with catalogs advertising exfoliating scrubs and aromatherapy diffusers. The universe became a slightly cleaner and significantly more confused place. Species that had once trembled at the mention of the Glargh Collective now simply wondered what new and exotic bath product they would unveil next. Was it a volcanic ash scrub from the planet Xylo? Perhaps a hydrating serum derived from the tears of a space kraken? The possibilities, like the bubbles in a Glargian bath, were endless. And Emily? Well, she just smiled, occasionally offering helpful tips on showerhead maintenance and the proper use of a loofah. She never quite understood the fuss, but she was happy to help make the galaxy a slightly more pleasant, if somewhat baffling, place to live. After all, a little kindness and a good scrub could go a long way, even in the cold, uncaring vastness of space.